Hello tutors, this week's training video is by yours truly, Sister Ashcraft. We're going to talk about when inequalities happen in word problems. Now this happens in Math 100B, it's one of the challenge questions, but inequalities show up in calculus, they show up in statistics, there's always something. We're not just talking about one number, but we're talking about a set of numbers, and we use an inequality to describe that. So we're mostly going to focus on when they show up in algebra. But first we need to talk about the between inequalities. That's what I call them. They're technically compound inequalities, specifically and inequalities. And sometimes you'll see them written like this with the word and in between. But if we take one of the inequalities and flip it around, it's still true. Right? If h is greater than -2, then -2 is less than h. I always use the example with my students. If this very tall student is taller than Sister Ashcraft, then it makes sense that Sister Ashcraft is shorter than that student. We just flip everything around and change it from taller to shorter. Same idea. And what we can do then is we can say, yes, -2 is less than h, and h is less than or equal to 7, kind of putting them into one inequality. Right? And I'm going to do that here with 0 and 3. First we flip around this one, and then we tag on the other part. And that's going to be very important when we look at an actual word problem that has a limit on it. So here we're looking at the city of Danville. The store sign cannot have an area that exceeds, right? So we have some words that have a connotation of inequalities, right? We have something that cannot exceed. And one thing you want to help students recognize is those words. Because a lot of times they will see a word problem and just solving it like an equation. So you want to help them notice inequality words. So the area cannot exceed, so it has to be less than or equal to 12 square feet. Rick is ordering a triangular sign, so we have a triangle, for his shop that has a base that is 8 feet long, right? So is means we can say that's an equal sign, and we need to know how tall it can be. Now the height can vary, right? As long as the area doesn't go over that. So the student might solve this using an equation, they might solve it setting up an inequality. Pretty much they get to an answer, h is equal to 3 if they used an equation, but you want to help them to see that we cannot have it be exceeding 3, so it needs to be less than or equal to 3. Great, we're done, awesome. And then they come across the answer to the challenge question or the answer in their book, and there's a random 0. But that 0 is not random, so you want to think about, okay, we're talking about the height of this fancy tackle shop sign, right? It's at 3. If it's less than 3, that's still good, right? Maybe it's here, maybe it's like 1.5. If it's at 1, that's good. It still has an area that is less than 12. But if we go to a height of 0, we have no more sign. Oh no. And if we go even past that, it doesn't exist. There's no bait and tackle shop sign anymore, because our height, any measurable distance, cannot be negative, right? The negative implies direction, and we don't know what direction the sign is going. So the height, or any length, any distance, cannot be negative. And even if, it might help your students if you draw this on a number line, okay? So if I have 3, here's 0, and I'm going to include it, so closed circle. I'm going to go everything to the left. That means I'm going past 0. It means it's including -1, -4, right? Things that I cannot plug into my area. I can't have a real sign with a negative height. So if it helps them to see, oh, that implies, just as is, as written, that it can't go past 0. Or that it is going past 0, as written, excuse me. And so we need to tag on that h has to be greater than 0. But again, we can flip everything around just like we did on the last slide and say that 0 is less than h. Can't be equal to 0 because that would mean we have a flat line. There's no sign there existing. And so because we know that h has to be greater than 0, together we put 0 is less than h. which is less than or equal to 3. So hopefully you can help your students to realize that the 0 isn't random. It's specifically telling us cut it off because we can't have any negative lengths. And that's not every word problem, right? Maybe I would get something where they can be negative, or maybe you get something where your answer is x is greater than 5. That's not going to include any negatives. So it's not every word problem. Help them to recognize when it does happen. And good luck.